Cheryl, I'd like you to go ahead and give your land acknowledgement as people are coming in, and then we'll see if Jimi is available. Go ahead.
I would be glad to do that. I was just looking for the appropriate background. So, and Jimi, I've got Francisco helping Jimi get in, so hopefully we can get him in.
Great, okay.
Okay, we acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered here today is the home and traditional land belonging to the Tongva Nation. Today, we come with respect and gratitude for the Tongva people who consider themselves the caretakers of this land. It is through their examples that we are reminded of our greater responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and to take care of each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Now, we're just wanting to see if Jimi was able to get on. And I see Musa Ghazi from Iran has come on. Musa, good to see you there. To say quick hello to you. And see some other people coming in as we get started here. We're probably going to have people joining as we speak. And I wanted to make sure that we're able to hear from Jimi, if he is able, Jimi Castillo. He's an elder of the Tongva Nation and he always says a few words at this conference. We wanted to make sure he had that opportunity. He's having a little bit of trouble with health, but is, trying to get on to join us. And Cheryl, do you have him there at all?
Francisco's working with getting him on. I'll go see what's happening. You might just have to chat for a minute while I go check.
Okay, very good. In the meantime, I'll welcome other people on. I see everybody coming in from the city of Carson. Kak, I see you there. The city, representing the city of Carson, that's terrific. And a number of people coming in from around the globe that have joined us in previous sessions. I see Ari DeYoung from Vancouver. That's great. I see Brett. I see you there from the Native American Rights Fund. And lots of other people I'm trying to recognize coming on. So that's great. So as we wait here, maybe we'll go over to you, Michael, if we could, and just have your words from our provost at the university here who supports this conference and wants to see this work thrive, continue, and to help build the field. So we'll go over to you, Michael, to say a few words.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrett. And it's my honor to be with all of you as we are convening this 12th annual International Cyber Conference on Dispute Resolution. And it's always a vital time to have this conference, but no more important time than right now, given the global events that we are all facing and the larger mission and commitment to peace building globally. I want to bring greetings from President Thomas Parham. Although he couldn't be here today, he is fully in support of this effort, as I am, and our whole university community. I would start by saying that we really have a commitment at Dominguez Hills for community engagement. And I'll give you 3 examples of ways in which we've done this over the last 2 years, given COVID and what we've been all experiencing with the pandemic. And you all know what's at stake here. Recently in the Los Angeles Times, there was an article about 60% absentee rates of students in high schools in our local area. The fact that our enrollments are down in students even pursuing higher education. Quite frankly, the thing that keeps me awake at night as a provost is I worry that students aren't pursuing their dreams right now. They see global conflict, they see animosity, they see people at highest levels of government that can't get along with each other. So if you had to ask me when is a poignant time to do conflict resolution, it's right now. And it's a mission we all need to be on at a very vital time in our society, both locally and globally. 3 things we've done since the pandemic to just illustrate this as a campus. One of the first things we did was that we were one of the top producers of face shields for our community. This was out of Dr. Kamal Hamdan and our students that work in STEM education. We produced 500 face shields a day at the initial parts of the pandemic. We also have really been dedicated to basic needs at our university. And basic needs is not something that can just be satisfied by building a pantry as big as the university. It relies on partnerships. So we've been working with the mayor's office in Los Angeles and our other local cities to try and establish a network of how can we partner to address food insecurities, housing insecurities. You can't do this by just setting up an element in an institution. It has to result in participation of partners. And then finally, we've been approached recently from one of our top partners, Toyota, who has actually come to us and said, we want to work with Dominguez Hills as a mobility hub for the entire South Bay. And as many of you know, during the pandemic, when we went to remote instruction, a lot of students continued to be challenged with, how do I get to campus? I can't afford to take 2 hours to take 3 buses to get back and forth to campus. So Toyota is partnering with us to set up a mobility hub, not just for our campus, but our community. So these are 3 ways in which the university is fulfilling our role as a steward of place. But again, it is my honor to be here at a conference where you are going to be introduced to an amazing group of speakers. Dr. Jarrett and the team always puts together a great team of speakers that are thought-provoking, engaging. One element of this conference is to stay connected. So to make sure that if you hear from someone and you want to follow up, one of the big roles of all of our organizers is to make sure you get their contact information. You build this networking community. We have to work together to address a lot of these issues. I also want to make sure that we really welcome our students as fully engaged partners in all of this work. It used to be, back in the day, I was a middle school teacher originally by my training, and I also eventually became a dean of education, where I used to graduate hundreds of students coming out from the university. And what I did with those students, I often said that one of their top jobs as teachers was to develop a sense of community in the students that they taught. And the students that we have at Dominguez Hills are a community. They are the leaders of tomorrow. I've had a couple former presidents of CSU universities say to me that they've been a little depressed with events in the world and what's been happening over the last several years. And I often say to them, when's the last time you've been to a university campus? Because I'll tell you, if you want to see hope, if you want to see optimism, it's really through our students, and it's through their eyes as the future leaders of this entire country and the world. They're in places none of us were at generations ago. And so that is our future. That is our hope. That is our investment. I welcome all of our students to this. It's a great conference. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to network a lot. And I couldn't be more pleased and honored to support this effort. And again, on behalf of President Parham, on behalf of the cabinet, the entire university, I turn it back over to you, Dr. Jarrett, and I'm looking forward to a phenomenal conference.
Thank you, Provost Spagna. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. And so with those words, we're going to go immediately to our first speaker. We're going to move on to our first speaker. That's Damiani. He is he's the director of the Global Center for Peace Studies in Brazil. And he's involved in a number of projects in Brazil. He's a great guy. He's a filmmaker. He does all kinds of interesting work. He's worked in the Amazon with indigenous communities. He's also involved in developing and building the arbitration program that he has at the center, and also supporting that effort worldwide, actually. And today he's going to talk about an area the United Nations have developed, and we see it elsewhere too, called ESG. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, Jay, and then we'll.
No.
Can you hear me there? Everybody okay? So far, we're okay? Connection-wise?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
yes,
Paulie?
we're good.
Sorry. Okay, we're good? Okay, over to you, Jay.
Well, thank you very much, Brian. I'd like to, on behalf of the University of São Paulo and the Global Center for Peace Studies and Conflict Resolution, thank for the opportunity to once again be here with you today. And in your name, Brian, I would like to say hello and thank all of the colleagues from CSUDH and from other places in the United States and around the globe who are watching us today. Generally, people are used to me talking about international arbitration, which is my area of specialty in international dispute resolution. But today, following up, building upon what Michael Spagna just said, I mean, we have so many issues around the world and our time is short. So I would like to bring some thoughts, different thoughts that have been, I have been working on as far as peace building and international dispute resolution is concerned, especially within such asymmetrical global markets and nations now clamoring for cooperation, And I believe that the cooperation among academic institutions worldwide is paramount, in particular for a more transparent relationship between academia and civil society. So today I will shed light upon a few topics, as Brian mentioned previously. I'll talk a little bit about ESG, environmental, social, governance, and as well as about a couple projects we have developed in partnership with CSUDH over the last few years. This include a visit from Dr. Jarrett to the University of São Paulo a few years ago when we talked about dispute resolution and blockchain. I see this is one of the topics we'll be dealing with today. And also a current cooperation we have on indigenous conflict resolution, and a new one that we intend to start on STEM education. So if I begin with, when we think about peace, peace is oftentimes based upon economic factors, you know, and that's when states and academic organizations, international organizations, shall interfere in order to compensate for imbalances that we may find locally and around the globe as we see today. So if we think about the increase in the production of arms today, and especially its systematic distribution in conflict resolution, that certainly does not contribute to peace, you know. Fighting does not promote peace. What promotes peace is peace and cooperation and talks. And that brings me to the topic that I will expand a little bit further today, which is ESG. ESG started a few decades ago when the motivation, as I mentioned previously, the motivation based upon cooperation among actors around the globe is oftentimes economic. And so the first time ESG was mentioned, it was in terms of investing, and more specifically, de-investing in South Africa during apartheid. And we see that some of those measures that were taken back then, they have been successful to promote peace in the area. And so the term of ESG developed further. And I believe that this acronym became really strong in 2005. We had a conference called Who Cares Wins, which was about value drivers for peace based upon environmental and social governance. That means taking care of the environment and bringing those who are less privileged to also partake in the way we relate to one another, not only at an individual level, but also as society. And this is when I think that the role of academic institutions towards civil society is so important. On this note, we created a few years ago the Global Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution at the University of São Paulo. This Global Institute for Peace has a few different programs. One of our programs is the Center for Conflict Resolution, the CRC, and there we deal with very traditional mechanisms for international dispute resolution, including international arbitration, dispute boards, and mediation. And what I find really exciting is that we started approaching peace also from different perspectives, as I was mentioned to you before, concerning civil society. So we have cases here dealing with indigenous populations who have suffered a great deal over the last couple of years of pandemic here in Brazil. I mean, their situation, they're already part of a population that's already excluded, but they have suffered particularly now in the last 2 years. And with the help of the United States Department of State and the US Embassy in Brasilia and the US Consulate in São Paulo, we partnered with a CSUDH and with the University of Alaska through Paulo, who I think is here today. And this partnership was very recent. We started it a few months ago, and all the conversations and the exchange of knowledge and experience and the challenges we have faced over the last few years, have been able to share it. The project is still an ongoing project. We're still at its start. And we chose 3 different tribes in the suburban areas of São Paulo city, and addressing mostly precarious living conditions for women and children of indigenous background, and promoting the opportunity for these women to overcome the problems that they were facing, mostly related to basic needs. And so here I have, if I may, I'll share a picture from this tribe that we have been, as an example, a tribe here outside of Sao Paulo. And this here was taken on March 8th, International Women's Day. And so the first visits that we did, we were trying to first detect what are the main issues that need to be approached. And then we realized that a lot of the handicraft that were produced by these groups, when they have to sell it to self-support themselves, they put themselves in very vulnerable positions because they are exposed to vulnerable conditions on highways, and here near Sao Paulo, also busy streets and predators. So what we are doing with them, I mean, they are building it themselves. We're just transferring some knowledge. So basically, the talks that I've had with CSUDH and with the University of Alaska through Poly was the transfer of this, listening to them, to see what are their desire and where do they want to go. So through some of the workshops that we're just beginning, they are being able now to empower themselves to distribute some of this handicraft via the internet. And so they have themselves built an area where they distribute it and finding options and solutions for their own problems. So this project is, as I mentioned, still in its onset, but in very few months, we're already noticing the ability that it has had to involve a great deal of people who actually needed help while respecting their culture, their distance, and listening more than listening to their needs and empowering them to do what they need to do. One other project that, based upon this one, I've been discussing with Dr. Kara Zugman, is also the empowerment of this group of people with a different project now on STEM education. So basically, we have been able to observe that a lot of these populations have very little access to higher education, if any, and especially little. The margin is very, very low when we talk about STEM fields. Here we're talking about science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And we're partnering with the Albert Einstein Institute of Medicine here in Sao Paulo, who also provide opportunities for internships for some of these indigenous women who intend to study physical therapy, nursing, medicine, or any other health sciences. So this cooperation has been extremely fruitful, and I see that this puts an effort, puts a value on the international cooperation we have been developing among our academic institutions with an eye on civil society. And we will have an ESG forum from June 1st to June 3rd here at the University of Sao Paulo, which I would like to invite everyone to participate. We're trying to approach other environmental and social issues and what type of governance we desire we wish for to help implement peace, to help pursue peace. And I know I'm approaching the end of this, of my talk, and I'll see if I can share one sacred chant of one of the groups that we have been dealing with. This group is a group from the very, very deep areas of the Amazon, between Peru and
Jay, I'm sorry to interrupt, just you have 3 minutes, so just
yes.
okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
okay. I'm following it here. And so
Good, Jay.
this group, they have a small migrant population here in the city of São Paulo. And so here, I would like to end my presentation with this 1 minute video of a sacred chant that I hope spreads to all of us and to the rest of the world, aiming at global peace. Is it going through?
Yes, uh-huh.
Okay, thank you for listening. This recording was done at the University of São Paulo this past Saturday, and it's a grandmother and her grand passing through the knowledge of their art, you know, the handicraft through cotton and organic cotton now. And thank you very much for listening.
Jay, thank you very much, Jay. Really appreciate that. Great talk. And so for people, just Jay is at the center for the Global Center for Conflict Studies in Sao Paulo, and I really recommend connecting with him after the conference and whenever you'd like to, because he's really inviting people down essentially to join the center and to connect with the center. Thanks very much, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we're going to move over to Phil Bryden, who Phil has done many things in his life, and I just want to give a quick recognition to Phil Bryden here for all the work that Phil's done in the legal, improving the legal system, in policy, in really humanizing the law and in humanizing administrative law. Phil was actually a professor of mine and some other people in this room today back in 1988 at the University of British Columbia, and gave us 1,000 pages or more to read in administrative law, which kept us off balance. But boy, was that a good course. And all his work in policy and dispute resolution and laws has really made a difference, made a huge difference in Canada, and I'd say the United States too. People take Phil's work seriously across the continent. He's had many roles. He's been a dean at New Brunswick. He's been a dean at Alberta, and now is professor emeritus at Alberta, and is really is a real continuing to contribute, and will be teaching a class later at the university. So Phil, with that, I'm going to welcome you in, and you're going to talk about 2 dispute resolution programs, one in British Columbia and one in Alberta. Go ahead, Phil.
That's right. Well, thank you very much, Brian, for that very generous introduction, and thank you as well for the opportunity to speak with everyone today. It's been very interesting for me to listen to Jay talk about what you might describe as kind of macro level efforts to address social problems and advance peace and resolve conflict. And I'm going to look at kind of micro level efforts to resolve disputes, either disputes between individuals or disputes between individuals and government. And specifically focus on 2 recent developments in Canada. One, the British Columbia Civil Resolution Tribunal that I'll call the CRT, and the other, the mechanism for online reviews of provincial administrative penalties for impaired driving that's run by Safe Roads Alberta, and I'll describe that as SRA. And what is interesting to me, and I hope will be interesting to you, is that both of these mechanisms were designed from the get-go as online dispute resolution mechanisms. And so I think it's interesting to explore how people imagine online dispute resolution working in a situation where it's not overlaid on a previously existing system, but it's a system that's designed as an online system from the beginning. And to do that, I'm going to look very briefly at four things. One is, well, what is it that the CRT and the SRA do? Second, why were they created as online dispute resolution systems? Third, what are the key design features that each of them employ? And fourth, to the extent that we have time, what can those of us who are interested in dispute resolution learn from their examples? So first, what do CRT and SRA do? In 2012, the British Columbia legislature passed legislation establishing the CRTC or CRT, although for reasons that we'll get to in a moment, it didn't actually open its doors until 2016. In some respects, the CRT looks like a traditional administrative tribunal, although it has a kind of eclectic subject matter jurisdiction. It has jurisdiction with respect to disputes concerning strata titles, which are is the term British Columbians use for condominiums, disputes concerning societies and cooperative associations, small claims under $500, and motor vehicle accident claims under $50,000. And this authority expanded over time. So they started with strata titles in 2016 and then added small claims jurisdiction in 2017. And then the other jurisdictions came in 2019. And prior to the creation of the CRT, all of those matters would have been dealt with in British Columbia's courts, but many of them didn't get to court, either because the people who had the disputes didn't have the skills to bring them forward themselves, and the disputes themselves weren't worth enough to hire a lawyer to help them bring those disputes forward to court. So what the British Columbia legislature was trying to do was develop a practical way for individuals to seek redress for civil disputes that the ordinary justice system couldn't manage in a timely and cost-effective way. And online dispute resolution was part of the package, but as we'll see, it wasn't the whole package. The Safe Roads Alberta is a bit newer. The authority for the SRA's online system of reviews of administrative penalties was created through the Provincial Administrative Penalties Act that was enacted in July of 2020. And they came online much more quickly than the CRT. They started operations in December of 2020. And although the act is applicable to any designated provincial administrative penalty, provided that imprisonment is not a potential sanction for the administrative penalty, the legislative debates focused on the first and so far only use of the act, which is to authorize an alternative approach to criminal prosecution for some impaired driving offenses. And what the legislature wanted to do was create a robust system of provincial administrative penalties for impaired driving to replace criminal sanctions for some impaired drivers, particularly first-time impaired drivers. And these are pretty robust sanctions. They include immediate license suspensions, immediate, albeit temporary, vehicle seizures, minimum $1,000 fines, and the penalties go up with successive offenses. And part of the package was a streamlined system of administrative reviews for people who wanted to challenge these penalties. And I think it's important to talk about why this was attractive as a way of dealing with impaired driving. From a law enforcement perspective, it's much more attractive to issue an administrative penalty to a driver who's caught at a roadside screening stop, blowing over 80 or refusing to take a breathalyzer test, than it is to do all of the paperwork to create a criminal prosecution. So from the standpoint of police, if you stop one driver and charge him with impaired, that's the end of the shift. Whereas if you're using administrative penalties, you let that, you call a cab to bring that person home, you call a tow truck to tow away their car, and then you're off trying to catch more impaired drivers. From the prosecution and court system standpoint, it meant that the relatively low impact impaired driving cases now moved somewhere else. And that was saving time in our prosecution and provincial court system. And from the standpoint of the individual who was issued an administrative sanction, it wasn't a lot of fun, but it was better than being charged with impaired driving and potentially going to jail. And even if you didn't go to jail, having a criminal record. So the legislature saw this as a win-win proposition and established a relatively straightforward online mechanism for getting reviews of these penalties. So first, my second point is, well, why online dispute resolution? And there are a couple of advantages. One is that when you're doing online dispute resolution, at least in terms of submission of documents and filings and that sort of thing, these organizations operate 24/7, 365. And so they're operating at a time that's convenient for the citizen as opposed to during normal business hours. Even though hearings are conducted during normal business hours, the people who are participating in the hearing don't have to come to a courthouse or a tribunal hearing room. They can do it online wherever they have a phone or an internet connection. And so it's much easier for the citizen to use these systems. And from the standpoint of government funding these systems, you don't have to spend a lot of money on bricks and mortar courthouses, hearing rooms, that sort of thing. You're mostly spending money on IT infrastructure, a few offices for the people who are managing the system, and many of the people who are adjudicating and staff are working from home. When these systems, particularly when the CRT was created, that was kind of a novelty. It's not such a novelty nowadays. But from a government standpoint, it meant that you were saving substantial amounts of money and still providing it in many ways a better service than you were in the traditional mechanisms. So what are the key design features? Let me start with the CRT. And there are three that I want to emphasize. And the first is the focus that the CRT has on helping people to resolve disputes themselves. And the major innovation of the CRT is something that they call a Solution Explorer. And it's an online expert system that anybody can access for free. You could go online and look at it. I'd encourage you to do so. And within the scope of its jurisdiction, the system asks people questions. What kind of dispute is it? The system focuses you in on what the relevant legal principles are and does so in a plain language, simple way, and then provides tools to help you try to negotiate a resolution with the other party. And it's only after that CRT intervenes first through mediation efforts to get a voluntary resolution, and then, if necessary, to adjudicate. And their system tends to be pretty successful. The Solutions Explorer is used 9 times as often, or nearly 9 times as often as recourse to filings with the system. So last year there were some 45,000 uses of the Solutions Explorer and roughly 5,500 applications to the CRT, and only about 30% of them ended up having to be adjudicated on the merits. About 40% were resolved voluntarily through mediation, and some were default decisions where the other party, the respondent, didn't show up, and some were outside the tribunal's jurisdiction and weren't addressed on the merits.
Phil, we have 3 minutes.
Okay, so I will jump. That's a key aspect of the CRT that I wanted to talk about. Safe Roads Alberta is a quite different type of dispute resolution system, because they're not interested in voluntary resolutions. They want quick adjudications. So the system is that if you get an administrative sanction for impaired driving, you have to seek a review within 7 days. There are mechanisms for extending that period, but in principle, you only have a right to ask for a review within 7 days. And the hearing has to take place within 21 days from the time that the administrative penalty was issued. And the decision has to be rendered within 30 days from the time that the administrative penalty was issued. By court system standards, that is lightning speed. You know, we don't have a lot of evidence to date on how effective these reviews are, but my sources within the ministry say that the system is pretty good, at least to date, at meeting its targets in terms of the decisions within 30 days, and that about 30% of the reviews result in the sanction being overturned, which means that it's not just a pro forma review, that people have a serious opportunity to challenge these sanctions. So what can we learn from these systems? Well, I think that what Safe Roads Alberta shows you is that if you want to set up a relatively simple and focused online review mechanism with limited jurisdiction, you can do it pretty quickly and pretty effectively. As long as you resource it adequately up front, the system can work pretty well. The challenge is when you try to expand that into areas that don't have that benefit to the citizen that the alternate approach to impaired driving gives citizens. And the proof of that is that Alberta wanted to expand this to all traffic tickets. And then people started to say, well, we're giving up significant due process rights. We're giving up our presumption of innocence. We're giving up a trial before a judge. And it may be that provincial traffic court is not the greatest thing since sliced bread, but we're not quite ready to give that up yet. And so the government kind of quietly decided to shelve those plans. The CRT, to me, is a much more promising area, and particularly that idea of making expert systems available to people to help them either resolve disputes themselves or to prepare them for mediation or adjudication, if that's how it comes to. And I can see this kind of model being used in other areas, not necessarily with an administrative tribunal as the adjudicator, but even if you left family property disputes and child custody and other kinds of family disputes in courts at the adjudicative level, you might want to provide more access to individuals to have the tools to help them resolve those disputes themselves. And the CRT, I think, is a really interesting model for other people to take a look at for those reasons. Thank you once again for this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing the other speakers.
Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. So what Phil's saying there is that through some innovation, they've been able to provide more access to people in these situations that they wouldn't have otherwise had. And it was just people getting together and coming up with a bit of, brainstorming about how they could make these cases connect better for people to actually deal with them. So Phil, thanks very much for that. And Phil welcomes comments. So make sure you connect as well. On the administrative side, Phil really is the person to talk to. And no, I mean that with great respect, Phil. And I just want to recognize you here also to the group and the people listening out there, because I think you've done tremendous work in all through your life, and so I just want to make sure people know that. So yeah, you bet, man. Okay, I'm moving on now to Renata, Valree, to Los Angeles, to LA, and here we go. Renata came to our program, did a terrific job. Now she's teaching in our program, in the NCRP program at Cal State University Dominguez Hills. She is the Director of Peace and Education, and she's been involved in all kinds of projects around the county of Los Angeles, in other cities and across the country. But let me just tell you quickly, she's worked with the Days of Dialogue with Avis Ridley Thomas. She has developed that, considerably, and is continuing with that. And recently in Antelope Valley, the Sheriff's Department has revamped its procedures based on her work doing facilitations, bringing in all the community members, the police and so forth. So that was a terrific result, as involving a community-based conferencing practice. And now she turns her attention to the Compton Health Disparities Project. The mayor of Compton invited Renata and her team to come in and work on this, examining health disparities. Renata, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you all for giving me space to be here among such an esteemed group. Just a little bit about Peace and Education. So this is an initiative that is a student-led initiative by the NCRP grad students. We started this project over a year ago. The momentum, the opportunities where we've been able to work with communities on different areas, different common values that they've been able to identify, has been such a wonderful journey. But where we are right now, I think, has brought me, and I can say the team, and I do want to acknowledge the wonderful NCRP students who have worked with me over the past, I want to say, 6 months on this project with the city of Compton and health disparities. So what we started, we were funded by the JAMS Foundation and the National Association for Community Mediation. We have a very small grant. It's about $12,000. And so we were asked to look at different areas, and certainly we had our choice of where we wanted to focus our energy, where there had been significant disparities and marginalization in communities. And so we began by looking at the community health needs report put out by LA County. And what we found with the data demonstrated was that Compton had the poorest health outcomes of any city across Los Angeles County. They had the highest infant mortality death rate, the highest rates of cancer, obesity, heart disease, asthma, I mean, you just name it. They had the poorest health outcomes. So we decided that's where we wanted to devote our energies to see if we could have an opportunity to work with, you know, elected officials and with service providers and with communities to see if we can get them together, help them identify a common value that they could work from, and then address healthcare disparities. So it's been a long 6 months, but it's been a wonderful experience. What we hoped to do was to look at the outcomes of this project. We wanted to see what was needed to create change in the community. We wanted the students to be able to hold the space. And when I say this, and I think students don't understand that it takes a certain person, there's a certain skill set that's needed to be able to hold safe space, to create safe space for people to be authentic, to be open, to be willing to hear, to listen, to learn, and to share. Then we moved on to our first steps in the process. So we had an opportunity from November until January to meet with as many community influencers as possible and ask them, tell us, what do you think about, one, what do you think about the city? What's great about the city? What can the city do better? And specifically around healthcare, what are some of the issues? So we started our data collection. That's what we did initially. That was our very first step. Then our second step, we went into holding the space, and we developed prompt questions with assistance of the president of the National Association for Community Mediation and with the president of the JAMS Education Foundation. So based upon the data, we were able to create some prompt questions, and we had listening sessions. Now we held them separately. So the first listening session was with the elected officials in the city. I had interviewed probably about 15 elected officials, and only 3 people showed up. We only had 3 officials show up, which was a little disheartening, but it wasn't, you know, going to deter us. Then we had our second listening session, and the folks in that room were service providers and community members. That was a very rich conversation. What we got from that conversation was there were 5 areas of concern. Safety. The community felt a sense of not being valued. They questioned their self-worth. They specifically explained and shared that there's a lack of communication. There's this total disconnect between the community, whether they're the service providers or just residents living in the community, and their elected officials, and there's no engagement. So we took those values, we set up a third listening session. And I have to, you know, just really recognize this wonderful team of students. There's Julie Ali, there's Wendy Betancourt, Nakia Prescott. We had Twyla Hampton Brown, Otika Macklin, Rachel Santee, we had Kayla Owens, Sharon Lennon, and we had Mary Grace. I always get Mary Grace's name wrong. McManus, I think I got it correct. These wonderful, wonderful students had so much compassion, so much dedication to this project. And so we worked through with the community. We encouraged them, you know, give us another chance. I had to go back and speak to the JAMS Foundation and say to them, okay, the elected officials didn't show up. We can't do this project just with the community. May I have one more opportunity to try and bring them together? We just had that opportunity this week. We had our 4th listening session. And I'm so happy to announce that we were able to identify 2 key leaders that are willing to address 2 key issues that the group agreed on. So it's community engagement and communication. So how will they develop a strategy to get the community involved and aware? And how will they communicate that? Because that seems to be a really big issue. when we created the space, we did something a little bit different that generally you don't see. So generally when you're funded for a grant for a project, you submit your RFP, you get your funds, and then you do your project. With JAMS is a little bit different. So as the point person, I had to attend what are called community learning sessions. That's just where I came from just now. And part of that learning process is that I'm working with and supporting 5 other recipients of this grant funding from JAMS. And we had to look at our process very differently. We had to do our data log collection. We had to go into the community. We had to do the listening sessions. We had to identify the shared values. Then we had to identify the key leaders. Who were going to be these key stakeholders that would work with our support and work with one another to address these issues. We had to look at, as we call them, the PECs. So the politics, who holds the power and position in the community. We had to look at the economics in terms of how would any program, any funding, any change impact the economy. We had to look at communication. How do we communicate with the different populations? If you have youth, we had to think about, okay, should we create and work with youth to create TikToks? Because that's kind of how they connect with one another. What about our older adult population? How do we communicate with them? We really had to try and identify what was the best point of communication to reach all of the population in the community. Then we had to identify who would be in the car with us. And when I say the car, we had to identify which of our community members would support this project from beginning to end. We really had to identify who those 2 influencers would be. After we did that, we had to, as part of my homework with the learning community, I had to identify what resource could the university bring to bear? How could Peace and Education, how could Cal State University Dominguez Hills be a resource to the city of Compton, be a resource as they look at changing the systems of care in terms of healthcare. And so one of the things that I thought we could bring, again, outside of the capacity, because we have wonderful students, is a passion for the work. The students have been remarkable. They want to do this work. They want to be of service. They have some really great ideas on how we can go into communities and support them and sustain them. And so those were the 2 greatest impacts I thought the university could bring to bear for the community. And then we had to identify what change could we actually create. So now we have our key leaders. We understand, we've talked about where their common values are. We know engagement is high on the list of priorities. Communication is high. Actually, they were actually tied. So that's why we have 2 priorities. And then what can we do to support the community? So one of the changes we thought we could create from outside of the university is that we could increase awareness of ADR. We could increase awareness of the different processes. We've been very fortunate to focus our energies on facilitative dialogue. Our students haven't done a lot of mediation, but they were so surprised to learn that this practice of dialogue is a very effective problem-solving process. It's just done on a larger scale with more bodies in the room. So we thought about that, one of the ways we could be impactful is bringing this awareness about ADR, bringing the awareness about the program here at the university, the NCRP program. Also, we thought about communication. How could we, as an initiative, expand, increase the communication around healthcare disparities? We could certainly hold conversations. We could do hold dialogues. We can design dialogues. The students have become very effective at doing that. And then we thought about the social impact outside of the university. What could we do socially to address healthcare disparities? We wanted to create an opportunity to increase social bonding. You would be surprised how many of these stakeholders, how many of the elected officials, people tend to live and exist in silos. They were surprised to learn about each other's programs. They were surprised to know what each other's departments were doing. And so we felt that through the process of conversation, that we could help the community come together and increase this community cohesiveness through dialogue, but at the same time, they could work together. They could learn the value of collaboration and address those issues, which again was, was very important, very prevalent, I should say, very salient issues around healthcare. The last part of what we've done recently in our learning community is that we've had to identify who would be our champions. And when I say champions, these are generally your community members that will go out and advocate and say, yes, we do need to look at our healthcare. We do need to look at the lack of access. We do need to look at these barriers. And what are the barriers? So we had to identify for JAMS, we had to identify who was that chorus member that would really support us, that was a champion. Who was that chorus member who would really support this effort in terms of being a service provider? And who was that chorus member that would support us in terms of being an elected official? We had a wonderful group of community members that all I can say is they were so open, they were so authentic, so genuine in sharing with us and letting us know what, where there was happiness and where there was deep pain. The other thing we recognize is that this is a community, unlike, similar to most communities, there's a lot of trauma. We also had to think about how we would respond to that trauma. There's little faith or trust.
Renata, we have 3 minutes left.
Okay, so one of the things I just want to get really back to the trauma piece is this community has been told time and time again, we're going to bring this resource in, or we're going to provide this program, and it never manifests. So they were very doubtful that we're part of a university, but we're coming in, we don't live in the community. We were told that you're strangers coming in, you want to help us, we don't believe you. We've heard this, this song and dance in the past. The way that we were able to move from that distrust to trust was our credibility. We said what we were going to do. We did what we said we were going to do, and we listened. We did not guide the process at all. We listened to what was told to us. We shared that information back to the community, and then we asked them, what is it that you need and how can we help? So we're very hopeful that when this change takes place, as we start to develop the community engagement and community engagement strategies, not only will they be community-led and that change starts within the community, we will be there to support them however they decide, whichever way that support looks like, whether we're facilitating their strategic planning meetings, whether we're mediating, because there's a potential for conflict. Also, whether we need to go in and do some negotiating or some coaching. But I can say this, it's been a wonderful journey. We could not have done this work without the support of our board. And I want to thank Dr. Jarrett and Dr. Castro and Dr. Delacope. I always get your name wrong, Cara, sorry. And Pastor Witherspoon. They've been amazing to support this work. And to all of the NCRP students, all of our wonderful volunteer students who've worked on other projects with us, just thank you. It's a gift. I can't tell you, I'm not an emotional person, but I did have to let a tear fall because I don't think anything I've ever done has brought me so much joy. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Renata. I really appreciate that. You are a real leader in our field. There's no question about it. Folks, Renata's working in the California area, but she's doing work across the country in various states, got all kinds of projects going. And we're so fortunate to have you teaching with the program. And so just want to thank you for your work at our school as well. So Renata's point is really all about, I think, to summarize it, it's really about how you can come together in a community and then work in a design way, dispute systems design, that technical term, to bring the community stakeholders into the process and actually work and figure out and listen to what the particular people on the ground in that community want to do, as opposed to coming in with a one size fits all and, an off the shelf system and just bashing it on people. So it's the opposite. It's working from the ground up. And I think, Renata, you've given us a lesson in that. So very much appreciate that. And we're moving on now. We're moving on to Dr. Jorge Leos Navarro. It goes by Dr. Leos, and he is the coordinator of the master's program in conflict resolution at the Universidad de Guadalajara. And he is coming here today to talk about something that's on a lot of people's minds in terms of the Canada, US, and Mexico. How are people deal with disagreements on trade and so forth under the new USMCA? Now, Dr. Leos, Jorge, what Dr. Leos is doing is he's proposing a program that would train mediators to deal with disputes under the what used to be the North American Free Trade Agreement, but now the USMCA, its new title. And he's going to talk a little bit today about that because he wants to partner with Canadian and US universities. Ours is particularly interested. Our program's interested, but we reach out also to the Canadians present today. Canadian universities are also interested. Phil, for example, may be able to connect on that. And I think we have Brenda Morrison, for example, from Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, who's present. Hey, Brenda. So go ahead. Now, this may be a little bit, and we're going to do some in Spanish, some in English, and we'll mix as we go. And Renee is going to chime in from our end if there's any technical or terms that we want to translate. But go ahead, Dr. Leos, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. I'm very pleased and grateful for this space. My name is Jorge Leos. Here is also connected Ceci Herrera, who is from the international area from the Universidad de Guadalajara. She's going to help me if I get in trouble in the communication for the use of the language. Okay, I have been in contact for a few months with the director of the Negotiation, Conflict Resolution, and Peace Building Program in the California State University Dominguez Hills, Brian Jarrett. I'm very grateful for his invitation. I will be very brief. It is my first time in this cyber conference on dispute resolution, and I have been listening to very interesting topics and people that I see that a lot of experience and knowledge in ADR matters. And my intervention is more some kind of invitation. It's with a great enthusiasm that I see that we have interests and concerns in common, that we have identified the need for our universities to generate a social impact that should not be limited to their communities, but should transcend to have an international impact. Because that is how our society is currently functions. It is global and it's interconnected. So I'm going to talk about something very specific for this time, if you invite me in the future. Specifically, we have identified an area of opportunity in the USMCA agreement. It is a document that reflects the reality of the close business relationship that has historically been built between the United States of America Canada, and Mexico. But it is also a document that promotes the use of alternative dispute resolution methods to resolve disputes that arise as a result of these commercial and business relationships. We know that the peaceful resolution of conflicts requires a deeper and multifactorial knowledge and understanding of human relations. For this reason, I am convinced that there is definitely an area of opportunity in the training of experts in the field of the USMCA, professionals in negotiation and conflict resolution that also have an understanding of the social, legal, psychological, and economic context that can have decisive influence in the resolution of conflicts between people from different cultural backgrounds. We know that there are many challenges ahead. However, we are taking the first steps towards making this project a reality. And we know that the more steps we take forward, the less we need to reach the goal. We are facing a great opportunity to take advantage of the technology and of the great experience that the United States of America and Canada have in this area, as well as the opportunity that represents being able to propose more and better ways of resolving conflict peacefully. We are at an early stage of this project. So if there is interest in joining from other universities in the United States of America or Canada, please get in touch. I want to use this space to invite you. It will be wonderful to have the participation to bring this idea to reality. On behalf of the Master in Conflict Resolution, we have currently offering 2 short courses. One course, a 1-hour course with the intention of serving as an introduction to the possibility of joint work. One of them is called Mediation in Jalisco, Background and Main Characteristics. And the other course is Evolution and Current Status of the ADR in Jalisco, Mexico. This with the intention of give some context to other universities. We have the intention in offer these courses online. If your universities have interested, we are with all the enthusiasm to work together. We have a Center of Conflict Resolution in the university, in the University of Guadalajara. It's certified by the government. We are working in a peace building program in the university. And we also are organizing a Congress about peaceful conflict resolution that's going to be in October. And I would like to invite everyone who's interested in participate. I want to write down my email in the chat so we can keep in touch. And again, Brian, I insist, this is a very brief participation, is more an invitation. And I am very grateful for your invitation to stay here.
Thank you, Jorge. I really appreciate that. Great job. And that's really a start of a conversation that we're going to have around building and training for dispute resolution under NAFTA and other potential applications. But the NAFTA one, really, the USMCA, really has, I think universities could do a lot more with connecting with those mediations and dispute resolution. So I really think that it's a great initiative. Welcome to the Cyber Conference family, and we look forward to seeing you in future occasions. And thanks for joining us and taking part in this. So let's move on now to Matthias Sieber, who has really started his own terrific guy. He's a programmer. He's already had a career in programming. He's now a Cardano ambassador, which is Cardano. It's a social entrepreneurial site. He's an ambassador for that. He's also has created a blockchain-enabled dispute resolution program, and he's looking to develop it. And the point, I think Matthias I'll say this for you, Matthias, up front, is that it's not all about the money here. It's not like a lot of people, we've had people come and create programs like this, and they say, oh, look, I've got my new program, come sign up and pay me money. No, Matthias is taking a different approach. It's actually a socially useful entrepreneurial approach in that he's wanting to connect with communities and with mediators, and they're bringing people together. It's quite a different one that we've seen, and it's inside blockchain, which means I'm giving away. Sorry. All right. So, but I know Matthias personally because he was a student here. He's a terrific guy, and I'm going to watch Matthias in the news because you're going to see this stuff. So here he is speaking at our cyber conference. Go ahead, Matthias. It's all yours. Floor.
Thank you, Dr. Jarrett, for the introduction. I'm extremely humbled to be on this panel. Over the past couple of years, I've been following the cyber conference as a student. So great opportunity. And yeah, like I said, I feel very honored to be here. I will, now that Dr. Jarrett stole a little bit of my first bad impression that I wanted to give, I will share my screen momentarily anyway, and guide you through some slides. So my name is Matthias Sieber. I'm the CEO of LOX, where we strive to unlock social potential. And before I get into what this acronym DEFLECT means, let me give you a few pieces of information about myself. So as Dr. Jarrett pointed out, I've been a professional software engineer for over 2 decades. I worked in plenty of startups in California. I was also a soldier trained in Germany's Division for Special Operations. Our co-founding CTO has a master's in computer science with a focus in machine learning. Our co-founding COO has also a focus on machine learning, but applied to chemical engineering, which he used in the gas and oil industry. So with that introduction, right, that sounds more of a typical startup, and just like any typical startup, right, naturally, we want to make the world a better place. Sounds credible, right? So to give you a little bit more of a complete picture of who we are. So I was a peacekeeper in Eastern Europe in 2001 and 2002, where I witnessed first and then later studied the importance of bottom-up peace-building processes. I graduated from CSUDH a little bit too fast from Dr. Jarrett's excellent NCRP program, and then kind of a little bit wasted my time in another institution afterwards. Our CTO has also an additional master's degree in social work, which came in handy when we built a shared housing app for a housing service provider that used it to streamline suitable housing efforts for the homeless during the pandemic. Our COO, who is based in Brazil, put his PhD program on hold after he really realized that he's kind of working on this wrong problems, and since then has been also very an active participant in governance of the Cardano blockchain. So the three of us came together. We co-founded our company in November of last year with the goal of launching a service that I will introduce shortly. But before I do that, just let me speak to the bigger picture, as we're really trying to co-create an ecosystem for conflict transformation. So let's kind of look at this deflect and what it means for us. So the D in deflect speaks to the decentralized nature, meaning no monopolies. It's functional, it works. It's ledgered, meaning transparent, verifiable, tamper-proof. This is where the blockchain component comes in. It's also an ecosystem, which I want to highlight that it is really an environment formed by the interactions of its elements. And this is all for conflict transformation, and I like to liken it to the term sustaining positive peace. So this is obviously not an investor pitch, but I remember in my final year at USC that a professor canceled the lecture on international mediation because he had scheduled a mediation 6 months prior. To me, there was and still is an incredibly long time to wait for a mediation. But it turns out that this is really not an isolated case. And during my master's program, I was really stuck by that. So by looking at the numbers of organizations like FINRA, we see that the average turnaround time is about half a year for mediation and about 1.5 years for arbitration. On the other hand, we have every year new ADR specialists graduating from ADR credential issuing organizations like universities. So how long does it take the common graduate, right, to get a job as a mediator, arbitrator, or ombuds? Well, the reality is, right, it really never happens. While you may apply some of the concepts, hopefully, in your professional and or personal lives, it will usually not become your profession in the existing system. It turns out that new ADR specialists are not prepared or even aware that they have to learn how to run their business, their own business, if they want to work in the field they went to school for, usually. And that certainly happened to me. So we at LOX take these problems, add some engineering, some artificial and human intelligence to it. And we have our unique value proposition, which is we help settling disputes within 1 week by including veteran and also newer ADR specialists. As we're launching Mediators AI this month, I hope you will see this logo or some variation of it going forward. And I hope you will have positive associations with it. You can kind of think of us as the non-evil Uber of dispute resolution, and I will allude to why in just a second. So the secret on how we can serve more people faster is that we care. We care about the experiences of parties and mediators. So per our website, we ask parties a few basic questions. The parties will then be matched with a suitable mediator for the case. All we need to know from mediators is what type of cases they want to mediate, their rate for a 4-hour mediation session, and when they are available to mediate. The mediator does not have to worry about their payments, or the parties for that matter as well, as we utilize smart contracts on the blockchain that facilitate that process without the mediator even knowing who paid first, to further also reduce the bias. Right? On the happy path, parties and the mediator show up virtually, on time, ready to mediate. So after the mediation, the parties' funds that were locked in a smart contract, which is kind of like an escrow, can then be released to the mediator and a fraction to our company as the platform provider and investors, and that all happens on the blockchain. And of course, most importantly, I'm biased because I was a student of Renata Valree. Most importantly, really, the parties have undergone a transformation and did not only solve their acute dispute, but engaged in relationship repairing and are now better equipped to amicably solve any type of conflict in the future. So you might already imagine there's a wide array of applications, right? However, it would be really presumptuous and irresponsible for me to claim that we will disrupt the legal industry and that we would make mediation the standard for settling any type of dispute within the next 5 years or so, right? So what are our initial use cases, right? So people have different opinions, beliefs, and values. I'm not telling you anything new here. The blockchain space is no different. And even if everyone in the Cardano ecosystem had the intention of making the world a better place for everyone, there is a lot of unresolved conflict, no proper processes to transform these into growth opportunities, and as a result, have a crippling effect on the entire ecosystem. Since our project has been partially funded by the Cardano community, we are inclined to obviously help clean up our mess. The idea obviously, or not obviously, but the idea did not start there. So if I had to go back and choose in 2021 what single type of mediation I would like to help facilitate faster, it would have been probably been matters of family law. Our own study, however, in the same year that picked up and enriched the California State Bar study of 2019 also surfaced a big need in issues surrounding housing and employment. Furthermore, we are exploring where and how else we can make a positive impact with the resources we have available. Tell you a little bit of where we were a couple of months ago, where we were going. So supported by my team members, I started working on Mediators AI in October and co-created the company in November of last year. We received about $350,000 so far without giving equity or IP, and expect a few $100,000 more in grant money over the remainder of the year. We also launched a side project in February that is creating some revenue for us already. I know this is kind of boring, but I'm just letting you know that we just don't have ideas, but we actually implement those as well, since I'm a new face to this panel. So, but what I think is what's coming next, right? So as I said, we are launching Mediators AI on Cardano's testnet this week, actually, and we'll have a mainnet release shortly after. So what this means is that you have an almost automated marketplace for mediation on the blockchain, which is pretty neat in my very biased opinion. So throughout this year, we want to onboard at least 200 mediators through our partners. All of these mediators, we would like to give the opportunity to mediate at least 3 cases per week if they want to. And pending funding, we will also undertake a R&D effort in AI-assisted ADR. I hope our team will be able to tell you more about that in next year's cyber conference. So if you're interested in our long-term goals, I'd like you to invite to read our white paper, which you can find on our website. So if any of this resonated with you, please get in touch with us, whether you are a mediator, are in need of mediation, are looking for a software engineering job or internship, or you want to help us through investment, partnerships, or other means, please do reach out. I'm looking forward to the discussion. I'll also share these slides in the Zoom chat.
Okay. Thank you, Matthias. So I just wanted to say what this, and I can just summarize if I could, it's basically taking a platform, it's connecting a client base, people, villages, communities who want to work in dispute resolution and build their own systems, and connecting them with people who mediate, who arbitrate, who do fact finding, who help communities, facilitators, and trying to bridge a conversation. And so it's in that spirit that you're doing it. It's not in the spirit of, we're selling something to a community, this kind of thing, but it really is the intermediary idea of creating access and bringing access to communities and also to practitioners who would want to work with those communities. So I think this is a step in the right direction. And I also see it a little bit like the sociology of professions here, how we're seeing the emergence of mediation and dispute resolution into these practices. And yes, we're going to be connected with technology. And so whether we like it or not, let's try to steer it in a socially healthy direction, community-based direction. And so that's the essence of this work. And so anybody's interested in connecting with Matthias, please do, and he can talk more about that. And at the end, we're going to have a breakout room for you to be able to talk about that in particular, the technology side. Okay, so let us move on. Thank you, Matthias. Very good. And let's move on to John Swarbrick. And John is a lawyer in England. He's currently in Edinburgh, somewhere near in vicinity of that castle. John, I count John as a real friend. I mean, a lot of people here I count as friends. And I really, John, you've stood up in ways that I really wanted just to acknowledge here and appreciate for me personally, and for in situations where, I really, it's bottom of my heart. Thank you for that. John is a lawyer in California as well. And John also happens to have worked in our CSU system of 23 campuses. He worked as the Associate Vice Chancellor of Labor Relations. So he really knows what, labor relations and practices are all about. He works in conjunction with Renee Castro. They do work together on this and consult and work with people in various situations. So I want to just welcome John, and also to emphasize he's in the area, particularly in the area of labor relations. And so if there are concerns, questions, or ideas around dispute resolution in that area, John and Renee are really the persons to chat with about that. John, I'll turn over the floor over to you.
Well, thanks for that, Brian. Yeah, I'm a little bit split both personally and professionally, because whilst I'm currently spending time over here in Europe, I do maintain a practice in California. And my area of practice is principally arbitration. And in California, I practice labor arbitration, but over here in Europe, I'm working primarily with international commercial arbitration organizations. So nominally, it's the same process, but they are very, very different in practice. But today, I want to really concentrate on labor arbitration. And really, I saw this for me as being Festivus cum early, because it gives me an opportunity to air some of the grievances that I have in relation to the way that labor arbitration has developed, particularly in the United States over the last 30, 40 years, maybe a little bit longer. So I see it really as the poster child for all the very, very bad things that can happen once you let the lawyers take over. And there's an old Afghan proverb which goes like this. It says, first comes one Englishman as a traveler, then come two and make a map. Then comes an army and takes the country. Therefore, it's better to kill the first Englishman. I have sort of like similar views about lawyers in labor arbitration, because long gone are the days when, in the words of one of the justices in the Steelworker trilogy, that labor and management, union and management deferred to an arbitrator who was applying the common law of the shop to their contractual dispute. If those days ever existed, I've never seen them. Now we have extensive discovery disguised as information requests, hearings which are indistinguishable from civil bench practice, and then even post-award, increasingly ingenious arguments advanced to try and get civil courts to intervene and set aside the awards which have been issued. I've ended up on two occasions in the California Court of Appeal dealing with these types of challenges, and they're becoming more and more frequent. And also, I've had to endure, as both advocate and more recently as an arbitrator, interminable, lengthy hearings where attorneys make the record as they would either in deposition or in some civil trial. And the arbitrators just let them get on with it. It's part of the nature of arbitration that it's the parties hearing. But for me, there's been times when I've literally been banging my head against the desk and saying, come sweet death, take me now. And altogether, it adds up to one of the most inefficient processes I've ever participated in. It makes good old lawyering in the court system seem positively efficient by comparison. And the irony is that the issues really are, for the most part, very, very simple and straightforward. There's nothing which is added to the process by all these layers of complexity, other than the facts that the advocates get much larger fees, and to some extent, the arbitrators share in that largesse. So massively inefficient. Mateus saying 1.5 years for an arbitration was an average. I'd say that was good. I mean, I've had some cases take over 3 years to be able to get to final hearing. And so with the pandemic, we actually saw some major changes forced upon the process. I remember the first time that an arbitrator proposed having a virtual hearing, and my attorney opponent was apoplectic with rage and horror at the idea that he'd be foregoing his day in court and missing the opportunity to cross-examine witnesses, and only reluctantly agree when it was pointed out that the alternative was just to adjourn sine die until such time as the pandemic was over. And then lo and behold, we had our arbitration, and we had one advocate in Berlin, another one in Sacramento, an arbitrator in Oakland, and a whole host of witnesses free range wandering around the golden state of California. But lo and behold, the sky did not fall in. We ended up with an award, and I've got to say it was probably exactly the same award that we would have had we gone through the whole traditional rigmarole and process. The main difference for me is that my fees were approximately 1/3 of what I'd charged for a similar hearing a few months before the pandemic, because I wasn't charging for traveling time. And everything was done much more efficiently. We ended up with 1 day of hearing when we'd probably have had a minimum of 2, maybe even a 3rd day. So as we're now getting over this and we're slipping back into a more hybrid world, it got me thinking about what can be done potentially to return some of the control back to the participants. And I didn't know the subjects of your speakers, but one of the things I've been studying and looking at was actually that CRT program, and also the report of Lord Justice Briggs, who in 2016 came up with a report on the structure of the English civil courts. And he had studied also the CRT process and adopted a similar type of 3-stage process of using software on intake, a conciliation phase, and then an adjudication phase. And what I've been mulling over is, how can you take some of these features from these public sector online processes and potentially apply them to labor arbitration, with the intention of making the process more efficient, faster, less costly, and also to simplify it to the degree that you can return it to the participants. And you could perhaps go back to those days of having unions and management handling the disputes themselves. And I was fascinated to just hear Matthias's presentation, because the involvement and engagement of online dispute resolution technology, I see as very much one part of that. The most interesting thing for me about Lord Justice Briggs' report is his recognition, coming from the home of the common law, that for this to really be effective, the judge has to take a more inquisitorial role, i.e. we need to be more like civil law jurisdictions and move away from having adversarial combat as being seen as the benchmark of a good justice system. And Briggs acknowledges that we're probably not ready for that to occur now, in the same way that Phil said we're not at that stage where we can remove the adjudication phase. But I think there is scope to soften it. And one of the things which I like about international arbitration is that you're forced to blend at times both civil and common law jurisdictions. And the International Bar Association have rules which promotes a much more activist role for the arbitrator. And I'd very much like to see more arguments for that, because if you have the arbitrator taking more control of the process, then that encourages litigants in person to have more confidence that it's not necessarily on them. and put those all together, and I can see a pathway to coming up with an alternative process which can be offered with a lot of those benefits that Phil was talking about with CRT, increasing access, reducing cost, and also significantly shortening the time from intake to resolution. And the arbitrators can help. There's nothing to say that, they'll issue a award within 7 days. Get rid of post-hearing briefs. Just do it on submissions. Get rid of court reporters and just have real-time reporting. All of those things can be easily done and incorporated. And I think that, for me, is really the future. That's the bridging part. I'm convinced that at some point we will be in that pure online phase where we'll be using a lot more AI systems, but we're not there yet. So we have to find that intermediate path to try and reset the way that we think or approach conflict resolution, dispute resolution, and utilize the technologies that exist today within doing what is possible with today's current attitudes and a realistic, pragmatic approach to the systems that we've been using. So that's my project. I'm going to be fascinated to reach out and speak to some of the other speakers. I'm always interested when I'm just find out that maybe I'm not just alone in my madness, and there's other people out there who may share some of my views and objectives. But that's where I'm at, trying to return control to the parties, save people money, and reduce time. What a concept. I think that some of my friends in the legal profession may be somewhat resistant to any or all of those changes, however. So I'm not holding my breath.
Thank you, John. That's terrific. And really emphasizing the idea of bringing back arbitration into its its original purposes. Actually, would it be a lot more informal, a lot more useful to the parties, and to not overly formalize it in the legal and make it more formal than the legal system. Martin Hunter, who is a good friend who passed away recently, unfortunately, who wrote the book on arbitration, international arbitration, made that claim. He said that the lawyers had overly formalized arbitration. So that connects with Jay's work. Jay, actually good friends with Martin Hunter, actually held a conference in which Martin Hunter spoke those same words unfortunately before he passed away. But he was really adamant to say that about the whole field. The other point there is in arbitration in employment contracts and civil rights matters and all, that how arbitration became it got misused, right? Which can happen with these practices. And we have to be careful about that. There are shysters about, that they're involved in some of these, I got to tell you, but arbitration is one of them that actually, unfortunately, got misused in employment situations and so forth. Did you want to say just a word on that or so before you finish up?
Yeah, sure. I don't have time to get into, to force mandatory arbitrations, but a lot of this, which I just talked about in labor, is equally applicable within employment law outside of labor. There is no shortage of disputes. That's the one thing which we are definitely not lacking. What we don't have is access, I think, to relatively simple, straightforward processes in which people can have confidence. It's not necessarily a build it and they will come, but show people that there are alternatives and that they're practical, and then go out and market it. It's definitely, I think, a bridge or a path towards that fully autonomous AI-driven future, which we will get to,
right.
but not yet, but not quite yet.
No, it's terrific point. And Vince Reddy, for example, in Canada, is the #1 mediator arbitrator in labor relations matters, has been for years. And he's not a lawyer, so it doesn't necessarily require that you be a lawyer to be a good arbitrator. And that's a misconception that I think has been promulgated by people who want kind of keep the market. Yeah. No, I don't want. Okay, that's a good point. So, and maybe lawyers, by the way, just who are in favor, obviously, of more humane and better. This is not a lawyer, non-lawyer. I got to say that because they're, in this group and in supporters of what the dispute resolution work, they really are working to better things, all over the place. I think of David Wexler, therapeutic jurisprudence, and how he's had judges now starting to think about how they craft sentences and anti-therapeutic effects versus therapeutic effects, and how that's made a difference in how judges, for example, will craft sentences and so forth. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate it. I want to turn the attention to Brother Harold up in the Yukon. Harold Gattensby, are you there in the Yukon? Could you speak and say a few words to us, sir?
I'd be honored to.
Thank you, Harold.
Actually, first I'll give you my professional title. I'm a reminder. I'll give you a little bit of my experience, how I got here. I first got in trouble with the law when I was 6 years old. The police came to my house because my brother and I wanted to have a train wreck across the field from our place where the railroad tracks ran. So we went out and piled a whole bunch of rocks and sticks and debris on the railroad tracks. And we got in trouble for it with the law. When I was 15 years old, I was raised to adult court. And I was sentenced to a maximum prison in Alberta, 1,500 miles away from my home. I was in solitary confinement for 2 years. Well, not 2 years, 2 weeks. When I was 15 years old, I was put into a dark concrete block in the dark and left there. The guards came in and taunted me and teased me and laughed at me. You been crying for your mama yet? Ha, 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 ha. You try and squeeze out those bars yet? That's when I was 15 years old. I grew up with a single mother in an alcoholic environment. I went to residential school when I was 10 years old for 1 year. When I got out of residential school, I knew 3 things for sure about my life. I'm stupid, I'm ugly, and I'm going to hell. Those 3 things I inherited from the residential school. I have grade 7 education. That's as far as I made it. I went right from grade 8 to jail. It's on my school record. When I went to jail, most of the people that I was in the residential school were in the prison. 95% Native in the prisons in the Yukon. And most of them are residential school survivors or generations from it. The reason I'm mentioning this is because my great-grandfather, from where I live here now in the Yukon, kept all of his kids away from that residential school stuff. He raised them up down the lake, 70 miles away from civilization. And that's my grandmother was raised up there. And our grandmother told us about how we used to get along. She told us about justice. She told us about dispute resolution. She taught us about who we are. We came from a matriarchal society. The women governed the community. They were the lawmakers. And they were good because that was a governance system that we had since time immemorial on Turtle Island. What motivated me partially was when I went to prison. And when I saw all those people from the residential school, they're good people. I knew them. They're good people. How the hell did we all end up in that place? Punishment. My grandmother's justice system was about helping people get back into balance when they fell out of balance. That's what our ancestors, since time immemorial on Turtle Island, helped them get back into balance. We now have a court system in this community. Every 2 months, the justice system comes from the capital city. We live in a community of 300 people. They bring the justice institution in here. They show them papers about the people in the community. They get probation, go to jail, whatever it is. They don't know us. They don't know who we are. They don't know that we had residential school here for 70 years in our community. And I think for me, I'm quite amazed. As much as I said that grade 7, I've been blessed to travel around the world. I've been blessed. I went to England once and got an award from Princess Anne for my efforts for a healthier community. We've been to Norway, my brother and I, many times, Albania, Berlin, Belgium. I went to Albania and we spent 2 weeks there working with 10 different nations. We never had one conflict. We used our grandmother's justice system when we sat down with people from 10 different nations. Peacemaking is what it is. Peacemaking. What the first step in peacemaking is to build trust with people, is to build some trust. Now I look at the world, the justice system, the institutions, and I say, I don't see where that's happening. I don't see it. But of course, I'm isolated. I don't really know for sure. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life sharing how our ancestors on Turtle Island took care of their justice. It's really quite a thing. And now in this, in United States, for example, they have more prisoners than any place else in the world. And I can tell you from my own experience, prison makes you bitter. It makes you angry. But what it also does is it teaches you not to get caught. And so what they call a correction center in Canada is really a corruption center. So here we're taking these troubled people, we're sending them to the corruption center, and we're expecting them to come back to our community angels. It's not working. It doesn't work. It never has. And so now we want to share in this world that's turning upside down, inside out. What are we going to do for the next generation coming? Shall we build bigger prisons, more prisons? I don't think so. I think we should try and find a path to peace, which is I'm ever so grateful for, to be sitting amongst you here and just sharing and listening a little bit, to know that how many people out there are striving for that we're going to do better for the next generation coming. If we can take the time to build trust. I am so grateful to Dr. Brian Jarrett. I don't know how many times I've had an opportunity to share a little bit here, but for the effort that he's doing to create a healthier future, I am truly, truly grateful. I know I call him brother. That's my preference. But here in this audience, I'll call him Dr. Brian or Professor Brian. I'm, whatever it might be, but on the side, we're brothers. We're broskies. And I trust Brian. I know him enough. He's been to my house. We can do some good work together if we ever did get that opportunity and sat down, because I trust him. I know him, not wholly, but enough, and I'm grateful for that. So good on you guys for the efforts that you're putting in there. I think we're in an interesting times where our law comes from the spirit world, not the white man's law. Our ancestors' law came from the spirit world, and I don't think myself, any human being has the capacity to change that here on this earth. Ignore it, perhaps, but it's still there. And what what our law says is make it right when things fall out of balance. Put the effort into making it right again, so that people, instead of us putting people in in prisons and then having them come back a disaster for us. How about we try and lift them up? Everybody has a story to tell. Those people that are trouble in our community and society, they have a story to tell. I went just recently to a judges conference on Zoom in Alberta. There was over 100 judges. They said, we want to try and do something different. They asked, right? And I said, they said, we need more practitioners. And then they asked me, where would you go to look, for practitioners? And I don't know that they liked the answer, because I said, I would go to the prison. I said, that's where you're going to find the people that have had enough. They want to make a difference and they got the experience. I said, and they'll do it for just because of their own experience, right? I don't know. I said, I'd go down to Skid Row. There's people down there that are just waiting to get involved and have something to share their story and their experience, right? So the qualification is a little bit less in my world. But again, I've raised 13 children and not all mine, mixed family. Some are hers, some are mine, some of ours, but they're all ours. And I have many grandchildren now. And like I said, my effort is for a healthier future for them. I don't want them to go through the shit I went through when I was younger. I don't want them to go through that experience. And so I'm going to spend as long as I'm breathing. Some people ask me, what does it qualify to sit down in a peacemaking circle? I say, we have a very serious qualification. You have to have a beating heart and you have to be breathing. And if you're doing that, you're in. And that's how we approach it, because we're all in this together. It's our Mother Earth, our Mother Earth. And we're her family, and we need to now realize that and start working better together for a healthier future. For the earth itself, there's going to be nothing left if we don't make some big, serious changes here. And for me, my commitment is that I'm going to live it as best as I can, peace. I'm going to share. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to try my best to be kind. And I'm going to help and lift up those people that have been victims of institution, system, crime and punishment, abuse. We're gonna pick each other up. And so good on each and every one of you. Every one of you, thank you so much for your efforts. It's not easy, this work. We all know that if you're engaged in it, it's not an easy thing, but yet we continue on. We're going to have a camp. We started a website so we can gather up people that want to. And I have a wilderness camp here that this summer we're inviting people to come and learn peacemaking with us, I don't have addresses and stuff like that, but just to say there is an effort into creating a healthier future for us all. And it's because of people like you, every one of you that's on here today. So I'm grateful for that. And again, Brother Brian, thank you so much for this opportunity. Many blessings to you. And it's still freezing cold up north. By the way, you look like you're in a pretty nice, warm, sunny environment. Good on you.
Thank you, Harold.
Thank you. Till next time, if I'm ever invited again.
No, you're always welcome, Harold, and your words really reach out to a lot of people. I should say that people may not know this, but Harold really is, along with Magistrate Mike Jackson and his brother Phil, really have brought back peacemaking as a practice and brought it back from traditional practices. Done a lot of work in this field, and people may not know that because he did this all very quietly and so forth. But he really is, Harold. I really should, give you a credit, a shout out here, and just to acknowledge you, because you really are the person people refer back to in peacemaking. In the U.S., you hear people talking about peace, and it goes back to Harold Gaddensby and his brother Phil, and also to Mike Jackson on the Alaska side.
Yes.
I think at elder and magistrate also of the court, that really in the early days connected with you and Phil, and then brought peacemaking back. And so we're all very grateful for that. And it really is useful for everyone, isn't it? Like these practices are so useful for all kinds of situations and all kinds of people. And so, and if you've ever not sit in the circle, it's hard to explain it. But once you sit in the circle, you begin to understand how that you get this sort of intelligence happening among the people in the circle. It comes to life, and you do that so well. And I just want to really acknowledge that here and your work, your life's work.
Thank you,
and yes,
brother.
and you and the royal family recognized you in England with a medal. And ironically, you were over in Europe, Eastern Europe. In fact, thinking about what's happening now, you were in all those communities doing this peacemaking work that people may not know about. But that's, I just wanted to take time to acknowledge that, Harold. You know, so
thank you.
Yeah,
okay.
You bet. And yeah, so I want to open the floor now to discussion generally and to bring in other people's thoughts and ideas. And I really want to, I don't know if our elder, Jimi Castillo, was able to get on. If Jim, if you were, please chime in now. And if you're there, I don't know if you made, if Gerald, if Jimi made it on, I'm not sure. So he may not have been able to.
I don't see him.
Yeah, because so he's having some difficulties with his health and so forth, but says he's with us and he's really, you know, thinking about the conference, very much supports it, and has been just very complimentary to the kind of work that's going on in the conference. That's Jimi Castillo. He's an elder in the Tongva Nation and in the Los Angeles area, and you know, sends his support and so forth. So I'd like to turn the floor open now, open to general dialogue. And at the end, we can break into 3 rooms just to exchange information. But before we do that, let's have a quick conversation about some of the things you've heard and like to chime in or to discuss or a question. And in this place, you're welcome to challenge something. Somebody says something you didn't agree with, we welcome that. If you think something was really good, speak about that too. And or local applications where you are, where you see practices can be developed. So please chime in, students, professors, community members. It's your opportunity. So go ahead. Anybody who'd like to chime in? And Anissa, just want to curate the thank you, Anissa. Yeah.
Just my
Thomas.
Go ahead, Thomas.
Yeah.
Aloha, my friends. I'm sorry I got here late. I only heard the last 2 wonderful speakers. I want to go back to Jay just to give up to make sure that we end on an optimistic note here about peacemaking. When I started my mediation business and practice here in Hawaii in the mid 1980s, members of the bar, the family bar in particular, since I was doing a lot of and still is doing a lot of family mediation, threatened to take me to the disciplinary council because they couldn't believe that a lawyer could be a neutral. The training and the brainwashing in law school was, and in their prior behavior as practitioners, couldn't allow them to grasp that. And now, 3 decades plus later, when I go to the yellow pages and look at the list of law firms, every one of them is offering a mediation service, even though most of them don't know what the hell they're doing. So that's number one. And then the other thing I just want to throw out, and I do this on a regular basis, I've written about it and so forth, but I think in the 21st century, we need to consider getting away from the word alternative dispute resolution to appropriate dispute resolution. We don't need to apologize about being an alternative. We should be the mainliner. The alternative is that when all peacemaking efforts fail and you have no choice, that's when you seek litigation. That's when you have to go to the so-called neutral judge to find some kind of justice. And then regarding Harold's comments, having spent years as counsel to the Yupik Eskimo people of Southwest Alaska, when I speak at forums or people ask me, where did I get my credentials as a peacemaker? I'm very proud to say that all of my training that mattered came from the Yupiks and observing how they handle peacemaking in their 56 communities in Southwest Alaska. And for that, I'm eternally, eternally grateful. Changed the course of my life. And one of the things that they taught me right from the beginning was that you should listen twice as much as you speak. And that's a way of building trust. And that's a way of respecting the angst, respecting the emotional baggage that people carry into mediation and arbitration. So Harold, thank you so much for your comments. You spoke to my heart.
Thank you, Thomas, for this comment as well. I'm glad to hear you saying the term ADR as referring to alternative is something that Martin Hunter, one of my long-term mentors, was always very much against as well. That shouldn't be alternative, that should be mainstream. One of the ways that we have found to pursue this matter, instead of letting it fall under the hands of, become almost like a lobby, a small group of people who feel entitled to handle the whole situation, is that the new Center for Conflict Resolution that we have, we try to get people from across the board, all subjects, subject matters, because that's, it has to be inclusive. And I think the being inclusive will make it grow further, because people were starting to become suspicious, start to become a business, and it's not supposed to be a business. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Other comments or questions? This is your opportunity to chime in and give your opinion on things.
May I say something, Professor Jarrett?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, as you know, hello everybody, and I'm very glad to join you. And exactly some speeches touch my heart. I'm very glad that I join you. I hope, as we see, we have a lot of things to do for peace building. It's not just about making peace or keeping peace. And we should improve and promote the culture of peace. I hope a lot of things should be done in the near future. And I would like to appreciate your efforts within this last decade, Professor Jarrett. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that, Dr. Ghazi, particularly your work in human rights, and you're a well-known human rights scholar, and have spoken and written on arbitration. And so we're very much honored to have you here as well, supporting the conference. Thank you very much. And you do it every year, and I'm very grateful. Other comments or questions for the speakers, or for any ideas that came up today?
Go ahead, Thomas.
I don't want to hog the show here, but I want to put out to this incredible group of people that Brian has assembled a call for help. I sit on the board of the Conflict Resolution Alliance here in Honolulu, Hawaii. And we have decided to undertake a creative opportunity to find a 21st century model for peacemaking and peace building that incorporates all of the diverse fields and people like yourselves, who I'm addressing, to put a model that we could then present to the state legislature here, to the University of Hawaii, to our congressional delegation, and so forth. Just look around at what's happening in Ukraine and other places. And I really feel that we have to move forward with a 21st century model here, that the existing models that we've depended upon, although they were groundbreaking at one time, are no longer meeting the needs of the 21st century. So for anybody that has any creative ideas, if they would please forward them to me, because we're compiling them. We're doing that research right now with some help from the Matsunaga Center at the university. It would be greatly appreciated. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. It's funny because you've been with the Matsunaga Peace Institute for many years, and you've really developed mediation in Hawaii and done great work out there. And so just a tip of the hat to you as well for the work you're doing. Other comments and questions for
Brian, there's a question in the chat.
Oh, yeah, from Brenda Morrison. Brenda,
yeah.
you want to chime in? Just turn your volume on and chat. Brenda, are you there?
Hi, everyone. So grateful to be here. Thanks
Thank you.
for your organization, Brian, and really
you.
appreciated listening to all the speakers. I'm calling in from Nicaraguam here on the Salish Sea on the west coast of Canada. And I'm wondering we have people from many different lands and places, and I'm wondering how the idea of decolonization intersects with your work in peace building or ADR, or however you're framing your item.
Who would like to chime in on that? Just feel free to chime in. Any of the speakers or anybody else who would like to chime in on that topic.
I have a spray. It's called Decolonizer. I'm still working on it a bit, but we're working on it. I think, just in response to your question, that the conclusion that I've come to is that I got to find it inside me, and I got to decolonize me, and then I can share my story. I'm not going to go out and decolonize other people, but I'll be a role model for what I think is decolonization, and try my best not to live in that capacity. I'm kind of interested. I've been invited to The Hague to speak exactly about that. Is colonized law working for the Indigenous people? Well, I look forward to that opportunity, because I have a real quick answer of 2 letters. So I'll let you know how that goes. But I think it's important to look at it, and to, again, for me, it's a real thing. Just to share a little bit, this camp that I'm getting back to, where you could call it a decolonizing camp if you wanted to do that. But I'm not to insult anybody, but I've decided I'm calling it the University of Unlearning. We're looking for dean and professors. If you know any that are interested, let me know. All right, thank you all. Hope that helps.
I appreciate that. Anybody else want to chime in on that question? Thoughts about that? Oh, Polly, okay.
Harold, thank you. And thank you everybody for your incredible contribution to this good work. Because I'm Polly Hyslop, I'm from Alaska, and I'm Upper Tanana River Dene, Athabascan. And Brian and I have worked together here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. He's very instrumental in maintaining my PhD in Indigenous Studies. And I know Harold, I was actually a cook at his camp, so he didn't, anyway, there's a joke behind that. But I really appreciate all of you, because I know that Harold touched on the health and well-being of our planet. And so it really comes with us connecting back to the land, the earth. And, because when we care for the planet cares for us. And my field is in dispute systems design, but in Indigenous dispute systems design. And I just know that we all need each other. As far as colonization, we as Native people, we know who our supporters are, and we appreciate our supporters. And we also know the opportunists. And so it's just something that I can't explain. Maybe somebody else can explain more, but it does come from being aware of the true history of what's happened to Native people and all of us. We're all traumatized. So it's like the healing has to happen within all of us before we start becoming instruments of healing outside of our, with other organizations and people. And thanks, Harold, for being committed for the rest of your life for peacemaking. It's very, I appreciate your words, and I appreciate all of you, because what I feel the change is that it comes from the heart. And I feel that, that you are all doing the work from your heart. Thanks.
Thanks,
Brian, for
this.
It's I think it's the 12th year. I've been coming for 11 years. So keep up the good work.
Well, I mean, it's credit to you that we're doing it. You've been in the background supporting this. And so big credit to you. Also, you're working now on particularly violence toward Native, people should know this, women, the Native women who are in Alaska who are being subject to domestic violence. They shouldn't be, obviously, but you're now addressing that. And then your work now is in that area. So I just wanted people to know that as well, that that's currently some of the work you're working on and pursuing. Paulo, you are a leader in Alaska. You're doing great work up there, and you got to keep going because you've got a lot of people behind you. A lot of political people too realize that the importance of this stuff. So anyway, just a big shout out from the group, and not just this group. Beyond, many people are supporting your work. So yeah. So I wanted to say one thing. Just when you think about it, it's really what we're seeing is a convergence in a sense, right? Like we're seeing the ADR, we used to like out of business law, ADR side, the dispute resolution side, and then you're seeing restorative justice out of social science or connected to social science. That's coming along and emerging. And then you're seeing this third practice, the indigenous dispute resolution, peacemaking, and it's emerging as well at the same time. So you, in a sense, you have sociologically, you have three sort of themes or lineages. But what's interesting is they're sort of, everybody's starting to talk to each other. In the past, people would have, it was about branding and they were pushing other people away. But I think the enormity of the problems is obvious to everybody. But secondly, I think there's a real, something that's quite exciting. It's happening where sociologically, the people are recognizing the importance of those other practices, even though they're distinct and different, and they should be, and that's fantastic. Like look at all these different practices. But it's important to have this smorgasbord of different practices. It reminds me of Professor Sander when he talked about the open door courthouse, having many ways to resolve a dispute resolution. That was inside the courthouse. But it seems to me that same logic is now on us, right? That basically there's these three themes of practices, but one should have many ways to solve something. And so community should have many ways to solve an issue. Organization should have many ways to solve an issue. And any individual should have many ways to creatively solve issues. So today, I think what we're seeing is the discussion of those different emergent practices. And the good news is we don't need to denigrate or, well, it's often the case, people would denigrate other practices. Oh, that's terrible. We don't need to do that. In fact, we can't afford to do that. Now, that's the key. We can't afford that stuff. And we have to really focus on working together to make these practices a reality for people and organizations and communities and where we can all over the place. So this is the new challenge, I think, of our time. And that's why it is the bridge to the future. That's the bridge. We have to get on that bridge. The old universe we have to leave behind in very formalistic and legalistic. We have to now start to come together creatively. And it's not about one group hating another group, one person hating another person. It's not about denigrating other people and all this kind of stuff. It's working together. And that's the key to it. And I'm starting to see that more and more. And I just see it with other people when I hear the conversations. We need to work together. The media, it pillories us in a sense, or we get pushed apart. We're told that we should hate other people, we should hate group, whatever. This is absolute nonsense, and it's not the case. We don't need to do that stuff either. It's actually not required. We can just get on with the work. So I think that's where it needs to be. And what people have said today is all about that, and the practices are all about that. Anyway, what do other people think? Sorry, I got a little carried away there. You can tell I kind of feel strongly about this, but it's you do see people really dumping on each other. What are you doing? We need to work together, not be dumping on each other. We need to be working together. So what do you think about that? Other people, speakers, anybody wants to chime in?
I will a little bit, if you don't mind, Brian.
Yeah, Julie.
I've just, our work with peace and education, we've been just like amazed at the application that this has in everything. We've handled topics about healthcare. We've handled topics about education. We've worked on business. Frankly, it's a movement. It needs to be a strong movement. And solving problems everywhere. And I think that's what I see is our goal and our job with our organization is just trying to spread that and let people know how it applies to work, how it applies to community, how it can apply to everything. It's just a better way of tackling problems and issues and conversations. It's like kind of like bringing conversation back. I don't know, wherever we got to the point of peace building is like, I think of it sometimes as like the rebel, movement right now, because everybody is so divided, and everybody that we invite into that space is just kind of like reminded that we should talk to each other and what positive things can come out of it. So
yeah, that's absolutely right. Others, comments and questions, which are opportunity to chime in here.
I just wanted to add this, Brian. In healthcare systems, I worked in healthcare systems, I've worked in different systems, and the intersectionality of colonization is transparent. People will tell you. You don't have, there's no need to ask them. They will tell you. Their trauma is very clear. Their experiences. That's the beauty of the storytelling and facilitative dialogue. But I think as practitioners, what we should be focusing our energies on is working within those systems as best we can to make those systems equitable. That's one of the things that we're trying to do with the Confident Project, is to make sure that no decision about the community members, about what they need, what they want, is made by any one group. You need to have their voices. They know what's best for them. And so if we can create space for equity, and that may be, unpopular in the beginning because you're challenging the power base, but that is how we create or we move from this whole history that we've had of hundreds of years of colonization. That is how we create that change. We've got to include all the voices. We can't be afraid to challenge the status quo. The only way that we can create a world that is balanced, and I love Harold's reference, is, we have to create equity. Everybody has a place in this planet. Everybody has a role. And systems are designed where you have individuals that are less powerful, and then you have those that are more powerful. And it's still designed as an oppressive system. So we need to be looking at the work we do in terms of asking ourselves, how do we create equity? How do we create equity? How do we create human value? How do we create human connection? That is how we can, as practitioners, I believe, we can look at intersectionality and move it from focusing on the past of colonization. Okay, that happened, we can't change it, but we can create something different.
Thank you, Renata. Other comments or questions?
Professor Jarrett, I would like to just make a suggestion for this conference. If it is possible, we discuss about the role of religion and religious entities. If we just look at the role of Orthodox Church in Moscow and supporting this invasion to Ukraine, they call it as a metaphysical mission for Putin. I would like to suggest that if it is possible, we should talk and have a discussion about the religious entities' role, if their effective role in making peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghazi.
Yvette, did you want to add something? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to chime in a little bit and also follow with the with the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion that Dr. Ranella was bringing about. I think that the work that we do in the alternative dispute resolution goes very much hand in hand with helping organizations to really create diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. I have seen a lot of the work that other consultants are being doing in this area of work, and it is it misses the human part of it. It misses how people can communicate and learn how to have difficult conversations, high-stake conversations in the workplace around this topic. And if organizations do not have good facilitators or trained facilitators on how to have these difficult conversations, I've seen it because I've been called to mediate cases like this. They ended up in the Equal Opportunity Department's offices as formal complaints, because if facilitators don't know how to take on these type of conversations, it could backfire companies, and it could be, considerably dangerous because they can get sued. So I hope that, these field of ADR learns how to empower themselves and go out and promote the work that we do, so that we can really help organizations to achieve really bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion into the workplace. That's all.
Thank you, Yvette. By the way, Yvette has a book out right now. It's a conflict resolution.
Conflict intelligence.
Conflict intelligence quotient, the conflict IQ. Just wanted to make that point. It's a good book. And so if your students want to look at a book, it's a good one. And you're doing lots of great work, Yvette. Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions? Other comments or questions?
The question that the gentleman had just before the last speaker about religion and religious institutions and what's going on in the world. I don't really, that's a volatile thing to even, to engage in a conversation about, I think. But I have to say, in Canada, the Native people were forced into these residential schools. I'm sure people have all heard about that now. Our ancestors had a very, very strong spiritual connection, but it wasn't, they didn't go back 2,000 years to find out what they're supposed to do today. They had a direct relationship with spirit. And now institutions, just from a Native perspective, it's quite questionable about who is it that said this is what we're supposed to do. This is how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. Were they healthy? Were they good human beings? Did they have wings growing out their back? Anyway, for me, I think religious institutions are going to create more trouble for us in the future, not find a way out of it. But that's just my opinion. And I'm grateful that I can be so bold to say it. Thank you.
Thank you, Harold. Other
Right.
comments or questions? Other ideas, comments, questions? Program that you're promoting yourself that you want people to know about? Yeah, go ahead.
This is Mary Grace, and my apologies. I am on a computer with no camera, so you have just my voice. And what I'd like to comment on, I'm sitting with this idea of decolonizing the self, and I'm listening to all these comments through that perspective. And what I'm realizing is this protagonist, antagonist, whether it's in religion, the God and the devil, or cartoons, or superheroes, there's always the protagonist, antagonist from such an early age, from the very beginnings, like even teaching children good versus bad, good person, bad person, as opposed to addressing issues as one connected humanity, having the humanity understood as a connected source, and there's an issue to deal with together. And so what I'm realizing for myself is the importance of addressing this at the most early age.
Yes, Mary, I don't know if you were cut off there, but that's a good point. Yeah, to get it, have it early on in education so that people can develop practices and see it as part of curriculum that's useful to people when they're young adults or children, you know, going forward. We have the Sally Patchins has been working on that in the Los Angeles area, bringing the dispute resolution to the schools. We have, I don't know if we're still present in the room here, but I'm just looking here to see. A number of people in the Los Angeles area have been developing ideas around working in the schools, and it's also, I think, something that Renata Valree is quite interested in working on it with peace and education in general. So these are, you know, we have a number of people. In fact, I think Scott, I don't know if Scott Martin is still here, who has worked with Sally and others. If anybody wants to chime in on that. We don't know. Anybody else want to chime in? Any other ideas, comments, questions?
Hi, everyone. Hi, Brian. One of the things that struck
Tina.
me is I just really enjoyed this conference. But when I think about trying to teach at an early age, I think about what's been going on across the country, this revisionism, excuse me, of actual factual events and kind of this demonization of trying to teach children about history in some type of effort to protect certain classes or of children from the truth. It's difficult to build trust when you're not told the truth. And I'm seeing it more and more, these new bills coming about so that certain things cannot be taught in school. So how do you overcome or even attempt to try to teach someone about peace when you've or trying to change the history of what happened to a certain class or group of peoples?
That's a good question, Tina. Sorry, I'm just having a little problem there. And it's a good discussion area. I think we're at 2:30. So I'm wondering if we can go into, we have 3 breakout groups for anybody who would just like to sit and finish up a thought in these 3 areas. So we chose 3 areas. And by the way, Tina, good to see you, by the way, from Maryland. Tina works in Maryland and was with the Salisbury program and has been mediating in the Eastern Shore and other places. Just a quick shout out. I just wanted to let people know we have 3 breakout rooms and quickly we can move to them. Anissa, if you want to, now you can click on a room and that's just to finish up in any area that you were interested in. You don't have to go to these rooms. It's just we're entering the conference now officially, but we wanted to make sure anybody wanted to connect or get information. We have a facilitator in each room, Renee Castro in technology. We have Cara Della Chopa is in development new programs, and Julie Ali is going to facilitate in peace and education. So anybody who'd like to chime in can move to those rooms now. We're going to end the conference officially. And I just want to say it's been a pleasure and thank you for everybody coming. And again, when we meet again, how's it go? When shall we meet again in lightning, thunder, or in rain? When the hurly-burly's done, when the battle's lost and won, then we shall meet again.